I want to go to the roll call, just and notifying the public that one of our directors will be remote, and Martina will deal with that. And our general counsel is also remote today. So Martina, do the roll call and then announce the Director Paulson is not here and be attending the meeting remotely.
Certainly, sir. Director Paulson has joined us remotely due to a just cause under Brown Act, as modified by AB 2449. Looks like child care posed an unexpected barrier to in-person participation this afternoon. Director Paulson, can you let us know if there's anyone over the age of 18 in the room with you?
There's not.
Thank you, sir. And so proceeding with the roll call, Director Paulson is here. For Bolinas Fire District, Claire Molesworth. For Mill Valley, Director Stephen Burke.
Here.
For the City of San Rafael, Director Rachel Kurtz.
Here.
For the City of Larkspur, joining us remotely, Director Gabe Paulson.
Here.
For the Inverness Public Utilities District, Director Catherine Donahue. I do not believe she is with us this afternoon. For the Kentfield Fire District, Director Barry Evergettis. I do not believe he is with us this afternoon. For the Marinwood Community Services District, Director Bill Shea, not here. For the Muir Beach Community Services District, Director Paul Jeschke. For the Novato Fire District, Director Bruce Goins.
Here.
For Sleepy Hollow Fire District, Director Tom Finn.
Here.
For Southern Marin Fire District, Director Catherine Hilliard.
Here.
For Stinson Beach Fire District, Director Mark White.
He'll be 15 minutes late.
For the Town of Corte Madera, Director Fred Casisa. For the Town of Fairfax, Director Barbara Kohler.
Here.
And as an alternate for Director Alexis Feynman of the Town of San Anselmo, do we have Director Stephen Burke yet? Berto, my apologies, Director Berto, not yet. For the Town of Ross, Director McMillan.
Yes, here.
And for the County of Marin, President Dennis Rodoni.
Here. Thank you, Martina. I'm going to go to item 3, agenda adjustments. And I do want to make an adjustment to the agenda today. I want to move up item 8 ahead of item 7 so that we can deal with action items, because there's a couple members that need to leave the meeting early today. There is a pretty full agenda. We will be doing roll call votes because one of our members is remote. So I want to go back and see if there's any other agenda adjustments. Okay, seeing none. Move to open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Board of Directors this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the board. Please be advised that pursuant to the government code, the board is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community, reminding board members and the audience to mute their microphones and or devices when not reporting out. Martina, there's no one in the room. Would you check online if there's any open time comments, please?
Certainly, sir. If there are any members joining us remotely today who would like to speak on items not currently on the agenda, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you are joining us by phone. And sir, there are no hands for public comment.
Thank you. Back to the agenda then. Item 5 was the Executive Officer's Report. Mark Brown.
Good afternoon, President Rodoni, board members. Happy Asian American and Pacific Islander Month, and also happy budget and work plan meeting. A lot of work's been going on, and we're excited about getting to this point. And I think when we dig into the work plan itself, you'll see why we're excited about this. Every year we should improve, and I think we've met that goal this year with the work plan that we have. Ann and I had an opportunity to attend the California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force meeting in Santa Cruz last week on Thursday. It's a conference of people that are looking at wildfire and forest resilience across the state. They meet quarterly and they move their meetings around. According to this task force, we are in the Central Marin or Central California zone. So Santa Cruz was technically our zone. We were asked to provide Ann was asked to be in a panel discussion where she completely rocked it and gave great answers, much different answers than I probably would have, which I think is awesome because they get a lot of perspective from people who have come from my world. Hearing a perspective from a different viewpoint, I think, was fantastic. And then we were asked to provide a tour for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break that was well attended, even though it's quite a distance from Santa Cruz. And all the people who attended were quite impressed. And I got to see parts of it I haven't seen yet. And I have to say that I was wowed with some of the work that had gone on out there. One point I wanted to bring up with the task force meeting is there is a tremendous groundswell statewide to have the Coastal Commission begin to approve projects in a coastal zone in a much more efficient manner. And one of my CAL FIRE partners that I used to work with pulled me aside and said that there's actually very encouraging talks going on between CAL FIRE and Coastal Commission to create a streamlined process for projects to be approved in the coastal zone. So we're excited about that. The CFED Conference and Expo, that CFED, it's a long name, so I didn't type it, but I'll tell you what it is. It's California Fire, EMS, and Disaster Conference. The California Association of Fire Chiefs is one of the groups that's putting this on. They asked for Ann and I to come down and give a talk about our wildfire paradigm that we have instituted here. This is a great opportunity for Ann and I to network with people throughout the state, learn from other people, because we're not the only people doing it. And obviously we can learn from other people, but it's also an opportunity for us to find more opportunities, some of it funding opportunities, some of it partnering opportunities. So after Ember Stomp, she and I will be flying down to Palm Springs, speak on Sunday, fly back on Monday. Public outreach, you guys saw my memo that I sent out, and the public outreach continues, and great coverage continues. We had a great editorial in the article, or in the IJ today, very supportive of the work that we're doing, and it just continues to go. So I do intend, we've already started drafting a press release for our work plan and our budget to after it is approved, then we'll push out that press release so everybody can see what we have on the slate for this next fiscal. I think you all noticed the name tags that you have in, and we wanted to provide that to you. So if you are at some type of event and you are representing the MWPA, we asked that you wear the name tag. Sometimes you might be wondering, am I representing my town, my district, my city? Or am I representing MWPA? So you're all adults, so you can make the decision which name tag you're gonna. You could go with a sash and line. Something's a lot of work, mostly from her, and that is the Geographic Information Services contract that is in consent today. It's a vital tool that we need, not just to build our work plan, document our work plan, but also for our metrics to be able to track what we want to track. It's going to be heavily based on GIS. The RFP, we received 6 applications from the RFP. 4 of them were invited to interviews. We had a pretty comprehensive panel, not just of MWPA employees. We brought in some other people that had GIS experience. It was a difficult decision to land on Green Info Network, but we did land on Green Info Network largely because of the fantastic track record that they have. What they produce is phenomenal. They're a nonprofit organization that is driven to share information in a transparent manner, and they've engaged in projects similar to this, and they have worked in Marin before. So we think that they're going to be a fantastic partner for us, and we're looking forward to that. And then we have the renewal of our Fire Safe Marin contract on consent as well. When we first formed, in fact, I think it was the very first contract I signed as your executive officer, was a 1-year contract that could be extended to 3 years with Fire Safe Marin for our public education and to manage chipper days. We the end of June 30th is the end of that contract. So now we are looking to create another contract of 1 year extendable to 3. And the scope of work is what is defined in the work plan for the fire safe. And the work plan specifically points out the public education is Fire Safe Marin, $980,000, which actually is a decrease from last year's public education campaign. We feel that the reason why that is because they've started creating efficiencies. Normally, you would think there would be a 3% bump, but actually it's been a decrease. And we have moved our chipper days management to MWPA. However, Fire Safe Marin continues to manage our accounts receivable and accounts payable for the chipper days. So that's included in the contract as well. So the 1.25 that goes towards chipper days, the contract fees funnel through from MWPA through the Fire Safe Marin and then to the contractors or to pay any dump fees, but Fire Safe Marin manages accounts receivable and payable for us without any administrative charge through that. Ember Stomp, 2 days from now. Very excited about this. And I really want to recognize our 6 board members who are going to be sitting at the table that we have. Directors Finn, Paulson, Rodoni, Kohler, McMillan, and Kurtz in that order. We have a couple of tables. If you've seen the map, there's Fire Safe Marin. We've got the Fire Foundry is going to have a table. MWPA is right there. We're going to have it looks to be a really great event. There is a new ideas stage where different people are going to be coming up on stage and talking about new ideas. MWPA will be on that 3 times. Ann's going to be partnering with Bell Cole. Martina is going to be talking about our grant program. And then I'll be talking about what the MWPA is doing for you. And I know some people were interested in the live burn demo and what times that they will be going on. 12 o'clock, 1:15, and 3:30 are the live burn demos. And that is a simulated structure so that people can see the vulnerability of homes and how to best protect homes. And with that, I'll stop my screen share and take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. So we'll bring it back for questions and Mark from the board. Bruce.
Mark, great report. The California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force meeting, was there any discussion of what the outlook is for grant assistance for hazard mitigation in the coming state fiscal year in the context of, the complications in this coming year's budget?
Yes, considerable conversations, and I've always been impressed by Secretary Crowfoot. He increased my respect for him, and I think he's starting to get his feet underneath him more. And he flat out looked at one of the panelists or the group of panelists when it came to regulatory and then grants, and said, "We're all talking about how fast we're moving. I don't think we're moving fast enough, and I challenge you all to move faster." That's almost a direct quote. And it had to do both with the regulatory fashion and distribution of funding and the challenges that are going on with so many dollars allocated for this work. The project by project fashion of distributing the money is not efficient. So he basically was challenged and find a way to get block grants going.
And just to note, Director White has joined the meeting. Thank you. Julie.
Mark, I was wondering if we were going to follow up with Dick Spotswood about his piece from a few weeks ago.
We are. The intent is for Rich Shortall and I to have a breakfast with him. But on a positive note, he was the one that called us up and let us know that a great editorial is coming out.
Good.
Any other questions from board members? Executive officers report.
I have my hand raised.
Thank you. I can't see you, Gabe. So thank you, Martina.
Yeah, I just real quick, Mark, thanks for the reports. The piece with Green Info Network, I don't know if this question's too early, but do we have any integration possibilities or a roadmap for integration with some of the work Charlotte Jourdain is doing, or Zone Haven, or other web services which seem to have some overlapping capabilities?
That is one of the driving pieces of language in the request for proposals, is someone that can bring all that into a central data hub and integrate everything that we're doing into one space, and then also create consistencies of our data format. So
if I understand that, Green Info Network would sort of put on their platform the predictive work that, Charlotte's group is doing, and Zone Haven would somehow integrate so that, evacuation management would be tied together with the predictions as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Let's move the public comments then on this item, Martina, please.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the executive officer's report, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. And sir, there are no hands for comment.
Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the board. There's no action required on this item. Any further comments? Okay, going to jump to item 6, which is the consent calendar. Opportunity for public comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the board's discussion of the consent calendar. The board may approve the entire consent calendar with one action. Any alternative items on the consent calendar may be removed by any board member or staff member for separate discussion and vote. I'll now take public comment on the consent calendar, please.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the consent calendar item only, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, you would press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, there are no hands raised.
Okay, going to bring it back to board members to see if anyone wants to pull an item from the consent calendar.
This is Barbara. I don't want to pull one. I just want to make a quick comment. Is that all right?
Why don't you go ahead and do that up front?
Yeah, it's just on the Fire Safe Marin contract, which I think is wonderful. But one of the things I'd asked Mark beforehand was, for transparency's sake, if we can put the actual year 1 work plan into the agreement so people don't have to hunt for it. And I think he wrote me back that he had done that. And I think if the board approves the budget, I think we should put the 980,000 in there again for transparency. So thank you for getting back to me, Mark, but I think that would be more helpful for folks on the outside. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. Mark, anything to comment about that?
Yeah, subsequent to the conversation I had with Director Kohler, we did attach the draft work plan for Fire Safe Marin specifically. And then we also put in the chipper days piece as our accounts receivable and payable. So that is attached in the document live now on our agenda. And the 980,000 is listed in the scope of work.
Great. Any other items that need to be talked about briefly? Seeing none, then I'm looking for a motion on the entire consent calendar, which is 5 items.
I'll move the consent calendar. Barbara Kohler.
Thank you, Barbara Kohler.
Second.
Thank you. It's moved by Kohler, second by Catherine. We can do a roll call now, please.
My apologies, sir. Certainly. So that was a move by Director Kohler with a second from Director Hilliard. Starting with Bolinas, Director Molesworth.
Aye.
Mill Valley, Director Burke.
Aye.
San Rafael, Director Kurtz.
Aye.
City of Larkspur, Director Paulson.
Aye.
Inverness Public Utilities District, Director Donahue. I do not believe she's joined us. Kentfield Fire District, Director Evergettis. Not here also. Marinwood Community Services District, Director Shea. Muir Beach Community Services District, Director Jeschke. Novato Fire District, Director Goings.
Aye.
Sleepy Hollow Fire District, Director Finn.
Aye.
Southern Marin Fire District, Director Hilliard.
Aye.
Stinson Beach Fire District, Director White.
Aye.
Town of Corte Madera, Director Casisa.
Aye.
Town of Fairfax, Director Kohler.
Aye.
Town of San Anselmo, Director Berto, who's not joined us yet. Town of Ross, Director McMillan.
Aye.
And County of Marin, Director and President Rodoni.
Aye.
And so it does look like a unanimous vote of all in attendance, sir.
Thank you, Martina. So we're moving item 8 up now, going to action items, the main event today, the work plans. So Mark, I'll let you kick that off.
I'll kick it off by just giving a brief description and for me to be able to express my appreciation for the hard work from all of the member agencies and MWPA staff. That the first year that we actually created a work plan through the ATC was painful. The process was painful. And if we follow, I've said this before, but if we followed that process again, there were going to be 17 nooses, all for me. And was able to come in and improve the process. The year before, she improved the process again this year. But the amount of effort that the member agencies put towards building that work plan stayed the same, except they didn't have to put as much effort into process. They put the effort into making a quality work plan. And as I mentioned up front, we should always be striving to improve every year. And we have, in my opinion, we have accomplished that with this work plan. I really think the advisory technical committee has found their spot, how they should work together, how they should work with the MWPA. And they respectfully challenged each other's projects. And through that challenging of each other's projects, I really believe they made better projects. And I do believe they increased the alignment with Measure C with that work. I do think there's a couple of projects that we need to continue to look at with a little bit closer and make sure the alignment with Measure C is there, but we have processes established in order to do that. Strength of the MWPA, as I've said, and I'll continue to say, is the strength of our member agencies. We have a ton of talent out there, and they really worked hard to create an awesome product. And then Ann worked with our MWPA staff and our Grizzly Corps fellows to package this all up to a fantastic work plan. And with that, I'll pass it off to Ann.
Thanks so much, Mark. Just to echo, what Mark said, all of the member agencies put in a lot of time and energy. The staff, the participants in the advisory technical committee, participants in the operations committee. So a big thank you to all of them. We also added a few new ideas to the process this year. So really appreciate them working with us on that to think outside the box a little bit. So to review the process here, this started back in December, really, November, if you want to talk about the work plan portal. But in December, the Advisory Technical Committee and Operations Committee started meeting and making plans for how this work plan development season should go. And we started that off by the Operations Committee providing their recommendations and their guidance for what this work plan should look like. And we'll go into that a little later. In January, the ATC and Ops Committee continued meeting, chosen a chair and vice chair, and really dug into communicating with land management agencies about potential projects, because land management agencies have their own internal processes and deadlines, and we wanted to make sure to work with our partners effectively. In February, we continued to meet the ATC and operations committees and created ad hoc subcommittees. And these subcommittees had homework to do. They needed to dive into proposals and really think through pros and cons and balancing all of the different needs. In March, the ATC and ops committees continued to meet, but also had a better idea for what that revenue would look like for next fiscal year. On March 1st, the ATC met and all of the kind of first drafts of the JPA-wide proposals were due and were also posted online for anyone to see. Those proposals were presented in the public ATC meeting on that date, and then the Operations Committee received similar presentations on the 8th. We had additional deadlines kind of internally about what proposals were due, drafts and things with the different member agencies throughout March. And the ad hoc subcommittees really got busy in March, and ATC ad hoc met 3 times, ops met once. In April, we had additional meetings. ATC met twice actually to review all of the zone specific proposals at one meeting and really dig into how to address kind of unmet funding needs in another meeting. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. The Operations Committee also met to think through those zone-specific proposals. And on April 18th, the ATC made some decisions about how to use that priority funding to support certain proposals, and decided to go ahead and move the draft work plan and budget onto the operations committee for the operations committee to take some action. This ad hoc subcommittee met once each for ATC and operations. And then on May 3rd, the operations committee made a whole bunch of great decisions, had a lot of really good discussion about how to move forward with funding and budget, and then go ahead and recommend this suite of proposals and draft budget for your consideration today. Additionally, the executive committee has discussed these proposals, finance committee has discussed these proposals, and that brings us to today. So a little bit about this process. We've been very, very transparent, had many, many public meetings, 6 public meetings of the advisory technical committee, 6 of the operations committee, many presentations in public meetings. I presented the kind of draft work plan as an outline to the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership, as well as environmental stakeholders. We have met, I think it was maybe 15 public meetings throughout this process. And the proposals have been posted online, JPA wide since March 1st and zone specific since April 1st. So every year, the operations committee determines an overall approach for this year's work plan. And in fiscal year 22-23, the operations committee came up with some great guidance, which then they decided to continue on for this year. And that includes continuing with the house out approach, because we feel that's the most bang for your buck as we move forward. Increasing funding and variety of grants available to residents, prioritizing shaded fuel breaks directly adjacent to communities, partnering with insurance companies to avoid insurance cancellations, and increasing public education, particularly to new audiences. So that guidance got us through the fiscal year 22-23 process, as well as this one. And then in addition, we considered the board adopted goals. So we have our 5 goals that you're all very familiar with: vegetation management, detection, alert, and evacuations, grants and partnerships, public outreach and education, defensible space evaluations, and home hardening. So now I'd like to go through our proposals. I won't go into too much depth about each one, but I would like to give you kind of a high-level overview of what's included in this work plan. So we'll start with the JPA-wide proposals because these affect all of the zones and all of our residents in our JPA area. So you'll notice what I did here was I noted what's a new program or project and what's a continuing program or project. And I thought that would be a useful way to determine kind of where to put our attention today, because we have somewhere around 120 proposals, and I'm not sure we want to go into depth into every one today. So here we have JPA-wide proposals, and you'll notice that many of these are continuing. So that's that column second to the right, continuing programs that we had in one form or another last year as well. So that includes things like the Zone Haven subscription, our work, the Wildfire Risk Perception Survey. That work is designed to get at how to better communicate with underrepresented communities, designing a survey, conducting focus groups, and then next we'll be going out into the community, actually doing this survey to learn how to better communicate with all of the residents of Marin. In addition, we have environmental compliance and implementation support, and this is really around supporting new projects, new exempt projects especially, but also projects that are continuing to be implemented and making sure we have funding for nesting bird surveys, archaeological surveys, botanical surveys, et cetera. I have, let's see, oh yeah, the next line here is public education with Fire Safe Marin. And you've seen more detail on that today elsewhere in this agenda. The risk assessment in the next line, this is about calculating the benefit for home hardening defensible space work. And then in addition, using that methodology that you've heard about previously, Willow Labs is working on this, and using that to calculate the benefit of shaded fuel breaks. And so we'll be expanding and continuing that effort in this fiscal year. Additionally, we added a new item, and that's peer-to-peer ambassadors. And this was an idea that came out of San Rafael. And this was a way to, again, better communicate with members of the population who haven't typically been part of the conversation previously. We also have operational costs, rent, etc. And we have a couple of positions here: Regional Wildfire Disaster Preparedness Coordinator, and Vegetation Management Specialist. Vegetation Management Specialist, there are two positions listed here. They would be partly funded through kind of this core funding and then partly funded through project-specific budgets. So a few positions here. The Chipper Day program is a continuation of our existing very successful program that Stephen Peters runs. He's retooled it a little bit this year to address some of the ideas that some of our member agencies had. GIS program development, our first phase of really working with that contractor you've seen elsewhere on the agenda. And that's to build a new program for the MWPA to really incorporate all of these different efforts that are going on simultaneously and make sure they're all talking to each other and that we have a centralized process and data management system. We also have an MWPA Home Hardening and Defensible Space Grants Program. You've heard about this before. This is a continuation of our existing very successful program. This year will be a little bit different. We're going to have access and functional needs requirements as requested by the member agencies to reinstate some requirements about income, et cetera. But we've also seen that most of our applicants would be qualified under those requirements regardless. It'll include, for home hardening, $5,000 with a match. Although if you want to do vents or gutter guards, no match is required. For defensible space, up to $1,000 with no match required. And then also for those with financial hardships, we wanted to also include a direct assistance type component. And so our grant specialists will be working on that to help residents where doing the work and then being reimbursed would be a hardship. And then we have our skipping down past vegetation management specialists who would be working for the MWPA and helping out with efforts such as the work plan development process, but also helping in the field with projects like the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break and Novato Shaded Fuel Break. The Fireside Defensible Space Inspection Application Subscription, that's a continued and ongoing cost. And then we have, I wanted to indicate the Evacuation Ingress Egress Risk Assessment, just to indicate that we're still working on this. This does not require any funding from 23-24 because this board has already approved funding for that project through last fiscal year, but I wanted to make sure it was on your minds as we move forward. So if you take a look at where these proposals fall in our goals, our board adopted goals, this is how it falls out. Now, the reason why I wanted to mention the Evacuation Ingress Egress study is because that goal 2 slice is very small for this fiscal year, but that doesn't actually reflect the level of effort because we have $350,000 budgeted for that great study that's going to inform so much of our future work. So in the Central Marin Zone, all of the projects for this fiscal year are continuations of last fiscal year's efforts in one way or another. Because of the complexity of the Central Marin Zone, really the way that member agencies went about developing this work plan is to come up with categories of projects that would be consistent across different boundaries, because as you're working, you're going to be crossing jurisdictional boundaries frequently as you're working, doing defensible space work or invasive vegetation treatment work, inspections, roadside work, et cetera. So you'll see a lot of that same language carried over into different jurisdictions. This also includes increased additional funding for the evaluation and inspection program. And that was an additional funding need identified by Todd Lando and others to really beef up their inspection program that they feel like really provides a great bang for your buck. And another note, we're still using CAL FIRE grant funds to help implement the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, in addition to the $950,000 budgeted here. So if you take a look at where Central Marin Zone funding goes, the focus is really on Goal 1 and Goal 5, and relying on the efficiencies of JPA-wide programs to address the other goals. So in West Marin, we have, again, a lot of very small jurisdictions, and we have County Fire very involved in the work in West Marin. We also have very high regulatory requirements and the costs associated with that to do any type of vegetation management in the coastal zone, and that impacts Inverness, Bolinas, Stinson Beach, as well as Muir Beach in the southern zone. So you'll see continuing proposals for most of the agencies here, including some vegetation management. The new proposals include some vegetation management on federal lands where the work is covered by a NEPA document that's already in existence. And so the environmental compliance requirements are quite low. So for any of those proposals, we'd be working very closely with National Park Service to make sure that what we're doing is supporting their work and we're meeting their internal deadlines and being good partners. One of the new proposals here is a coastal zone project scoping and environmental compliance effort, and that's the last item on this table. We have a public works plan in process with Coastal Commission staff, and we're coordinating with county planning staff as well. But in addition to that, we're going to take some time to work with all the coastal agencies to kind of create a bit of a vision. What is this wish list that we'd like to accomplish in the next several years? What are the highest priorities, and what are the environmental compliance pathways for those things? Do we bundle them into one effort? Are there discrete projects and a kind of a phased approach, et cetera? So we're going to be thinking through what kind of work we'd like to see, and then what the CEQA compliance would be, and then in addition, what the Coastal Act compliance would be. As I mentioned in my staff report for the work plan implementation, working with the Coastal Commission, has some challenges. There's been some staff turnover lately. And so there's the exact timeline is a bit of a question mark, but we remain committed, and I know Coastal Commission staff would really like to work with us as well. And county planning staff has been fantastic. Everybody's schedules are quite full. So creating new meeting invitations that work for everyone has been a challenge, but we're continuing to move forward with that. Again, in West Marin, most of the dollars spent are around vegetation management. We also have quite a bit of effort around defensible space and home hardening, and then a small proposal related to alerts. Moving on to Novato. A lot of these proposals, again, are continuations of previous years' efforts. Some of the new ones include 1.5 positions for fire mitigation rangers. And this is modeled on San Rafael's efforts to look for ignition sources, especially in areas that have high potential for ignitions, a lot of history there. Some of that revolves around the unhoused populations, cooking, and other activities in wildlands. Additionally, we'll have a new demonstration garden at Novato Fire's administration building. And then Novato is also staffing up to do all this great work, including implementing the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break. So there's a new position, a Novato Vegetation Management Specialist, more of an entry-level position. And I have the wrong title on the top, but Novato zone proposals. So this is how it plays out. Each of the 5 zones are addressed. So in the San Rafael zone, again, most of the proposals are continuations of previous year's proposals, but we do see a few new ones. That includes evacuation drills, some additional educational landscaping efforts, and a wildfire playbook that's part of a larger effort, but would be the component of that larger planning effort specifically related to wildfire, and would then feed into evacuation planning efforts and other related efforts. So no new vegetation management projects on the books for next year, but continued implementation and maintenance of existing projects. And this is how it plays out in terms of budget and the goals in San Rafael, with a significant portion of the budget going towards existing vegetation management projects. Now in Southern Marin, we see continued implementation of existing projects. We also see a little bit of rollover where Southern Marin staff really wanted to indicate projects that are, or staffing positions, especially that are going to be filled where the dollars weren't spent in fiscal year 22-23, but they'd like to use that for next fiscal year. And so that includes a vegetation management specialist. You'll see an indication that 0 would be spent from the 23-24 budget, but 22-23 budget would be put towards that. Additionally, we have the LRAD effort, the Emergency Notification Network, and plenty of rollover there to start constructing approved LRAD projects. We have a new proposal here that would help evacuations in Muir Beach. You might be familiar with the project that was implemented this last fiscal year in coordination with National Park Service. This work would be roadside vegetation work in that area, but on the other side of the road. So this is non-federal land. We'd need additional CEQA and Coastal Act compliance. And then there was a request to include warning signs. That's the last item on the list here. Marin County Fire will be working with a couple of different fire districts or facilities to put signage on the roads, especially for tourists and others who need instructions during either incidents or red flag events. And this is a good way to communicate with those who are not plugged into Alert Marin or other alert systems. So the vast majority of the budget in Southern Marin would be going towards vegetation management and defensible space and home hardening. So overall, you know, you'll see a lot of repeats from last year and some new proposals. We have about 22 new proposals this year. And generally speaking, in Central Marin, that includes additional budget for inspections. In the West Zone, that includes vegetation management activities, chipper days, alerts, and some forward planning. In Novato, the new proposals are really around staffing and some fire smart landscaping. In San Rafael, it's related to evacuation drills, fire smart landscaping, and the wildfire playbook. In Southern Marin, the new projects are around vegetation route or vegetation management along evacuation routes in Muir Beach, and some staffing and some signage. And JPA-wide, the new proposals revolve around that GIS program, staffing, additional outreach to underrepresented communities. And then we have 101 continuing proposals for a total of 123 proposals for next fiscal year. So, and then I wanted to end with just appreciation for the Advisory Technical Committee and Operations Committee and all the staff who put time and effort into this. There were a lot of conversations. Some were easy, some were difficult. Trying to determine how to, you know, one of the things that Mark and I introduced this year was the idea that through the budgeting process, maybe we budget for 80% of the core budget, and then think about that additional 20% in a creative way that allows for some flexibility to fund projects or proposals in areas where funding is a little low and the need is high, such as in the coastal zone. We also thought about potentially funding new and emerging projects, projects that were especially high profile and there was a lot of need. That methodology in terms of how to think through funding, kind of thinking outside of the box for funding, we'll revisit that in the beginning of next fiscal year to think through that methodology, and the ATC and Operations Committee will provide their input. This year, the way it played out was in West Marin, the planning effort for the coastal zone really needed some additional funding because of the high regulatory burden in the coastal zone. And so the ATC and Operations Committee determined that what we would do is fund that project with an extra $200,000 from that priority funding pool, and then take the remainder of that and redistribute that to the member agencies. And that was a great kind of first step towards thinking about using that 20% in a creative way that really facilitates a regional perspective. And it was a really great conversation, a great first step towards thinking that through. So in terms of next steps, this document will need to be finalized. We'll go through with a fine-tooth comb and look for all the typos and the page numbers that are off and the formatting issues before we hit publish. And then we'll be creating an executive summary. So more bite-sized document that can be distributed and printed, and you will distribute a copy of that to all of you. And with that, I'll end with the staff recommendation that you provide feedback, any thoughts and ideas, and then vote to adopt the attached resolution approving the draft fiscal year 23-24 work plan. And I'm happy to take questions.
Great, thank you, Ann. So board members, questions, comments about the work plan? Go ahead, Julie.
And I think this is an amazing document and it shows so much work. So thank you so much for leading all of those moving parts. I know it was really, really challenging. I just have two things I wanted to learn a little bit more about. The first is the coastal zone project scoping. I'm wondering about the timing and what kind of public participation would be involved in that.
Yeah, we are we will be in the process of determining what that's going to look like. So the idea here is to work with our environmental consultants and all of our member agencies to scope out that new task for Panorama to take on. And I think that will involve quite a bit of thought with not only our member agencies, but also the public as well. So many of them already are working with their Firewise communities to think through projects such as the Muir Beach Highway 1 evacuation corridor work that took place. There were a lot of conversations with neighborhood groups to make that happen. And I think we'll be doing that again. A lot of ideas and concerns and sensitive natural resources in the coastal zone. And we want to be sensitive to all of that.
And my other follow-up was on the development of the city of San Rafael, their wildfire playbook. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, I saw in the budget, it's not that much money, $10,000, but I'm wondering if you could elaborate on the process and also if that's a tool that could be used by other jurisdictions.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't have the details for all of that. I'm wondering if our board member from San Rafael might know a little more about that, or Mark.
It's my understanding of the project, and it's one that I think you're right, that it can expand to other member agencies. And that is providing a playbook that connects the wildfire pre-fire mitigations that we have been doing to this suppression world, so that when resources are responding to an event, it connects them. They're able to see what prevention efforts have been in that area and utilize the shaded fuel breaks that we've been putting in, so on and so forth, to their advantage on the fire ground. Having been a recipient of these types of packages when I've arrived at fires, I can speak to the tremendous benefit.
Bruce?
I'll echo Julie's comments, Ann and team, and I went through the entire package, read every word, and I want to say that this is an astounding body of work, and I'm really just the ATC ops, the negotiations that went on, some difficult conversations that went on, that real peer-to-peer learning and peer-to-peer education, which is really great. The one project that I find interesting, it's the JPA-wide project, which is assessing the effectiveness of home hardening, defensible space work, and shaded fuel breaks on risk reduction, I think is really what we're talking about here. And I know that this ties directly to our strategic plan, and it ties directly to our metrics and our monitoring. And also, I believe that it's gonna roll back into educating wildfire mitigation specialists when they knock on my door and give me 16 recommendations regarding what I need to do. And I've done 6 of them. I'm not sure that I did the most, the highest priority. And I think this is really critical work, but I think I understand that this is something that we are building out as an authority. There is no off the shelf, clear algorithm for, we know we need the 0 to 5, and we know the defensible space is important, but when it comes to a home that has 16 things that need to be done, where to start? Is it my understanding then that we're going to start fine tuning, or first is what's being done, understand what's being done. Secondly, fine tuning recommendations so that we can be much more effective in the outcomes associated with our investments.
And I'll cover that one. And you're 100% right. That is exactly what we're looking to do. And I think the simplest way to put it is that there is a difference between hazard and risk. The hazard would be the Italian cypress. The risk is, will that Italian cypress contribute significantly to the fire spread? Italian cypress that are in line with the wind and close to a home is a higher risk than Italian cypress sitting in the middle of a 30-acre plot. So that is exactly where we're aiming this at.
So I want to commend the authority and the team, the strategic team. It could be the ad hoc group that is all that are responsible for kind of piecing this together, which is being most effective as we can. I would suggest, and this is really a later agenda item, that at some point in time you consider this to be sharing with the board the process, the protocols, the algorithms that you put together, so we can just all get smarter and be more effective with the investments that we make.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Catherine.
So I have a comment that's kind of the opposite. At the end, this is fantastic. I mean, it's just amazing. Popular summary for all of us for people who don't read through every detail, and for non-board members, a popular summary would be great, with perhaps a QR code that says, if you want to read the detailed report, you can flash on this and you can go to it online. I know that I do get discussions in my own neighborhood from people wanting to know about things that affect them personally. The grants program on house hardening, I don't think that's clear. I think that we have in the past made information available about prevention and cutting down shrubs and things like that. So this would be really helpful. So it's just, awesome. This whole thing is awesome, but making it really, friendly to, I'm thinking of me and my neighbors, and many of them, it's a transitional neighborhood. So we have old people and we have brand new people who have just moved in. So that would be my hope, that we could do that. That's it.
I love the idea of the QR code in the executive summary. It's a great idea. Thank you.
Perfect. Stephen.
To piggyback on Catherine first, I'll go you one better, which is every year the civil grand jury issues its report, and the IJ publicizes it, popularizes it, all that stuff. You could take out a one-page ad in the IJ that had the QR code in it that basically does what Catherine was describing, or use other media, not just the newspaper, but a lot of my neighbors are elderly and they read the IJ. They don't know about the grant program. So I think that that some combination of investment in publicity as well as, well-placed and well-timed editorials and things would really be beneficial, especially this time of year. So Monday night at our council meeting, I announced that, hey, it's chipper season. Go to your website, check it out. 1% of the people listening will do that, but it's a reminder, right? So I think that would be helpful in terms of just publicizing the great work. My next comment is this is a superb distillation of a really complex process for our benefit, and I really appreciate it. A question for today, and then maybe a future question for the Finance Committee to talk about on an agenda. As you kind of go down this 80-20 path, well, let me go back a step. The first few years of the agency are addressing a lot of pent-up demand and a lot of wanna-dos, need-to-dos, nice-to-dos, and a lot of politicking goes into it and a lot of balancing and things like that. You're going to burn through that over the next year or two, and you're going to have 6 or 7 more years of funding to really look at some of the major needs. Plus, you're going to have the GIS and Lifehaven and other data. So I'm wondering, with the 20% portion of the discretionary spending, if you will, if staff will begin to have more influence based on the data and learning that you are and the agency is accumulating, right? So we may think, Ross Valley, Novato, Western Marin are all super priorities and they're getting their funding and stuff like that. But the data may also tell us other things that have not been brought up yet. So I'm just wondering where you guys see your role in that conversation with the data you're accumulating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm going to share my screen. It's not a slide, but it's in the staff report. So part of the discussion around the 80-20, 80% of revenue generated in any particular zone should be spent within that zone, averaged over 5 years. But that does provide some flexibility to think through how to use, maybe set aside 20%, up to 20% to think a bit more creatively. The discussion we had with the advisory technical committee and specifically the ad hoc subcommittee was, what criteria to use to think through how to use that funding. This is draft, and this is in your staff report that you received for today. Some of the things that we thought about were very high need due to regulatory burden, et cetera. But also, if you take a look at this list, we have a lot of studies ongoing that's generating a lot of data that can help us make really good decisions about where to put our dollars. Objective decisions, regardless of who's in staff level at MWPA. We have an evacuation ingress egress study that can help us decide where within those already approved polygons that work should take place. And we have our wildfire risk perception survey, which will tell us how to better communicate with populations. We have our on parcel and fuel break risk assessment. That's going to give us great ideas about what's working and how well it's working in different locations for shaded fuel breaks. And we're going to have so much data at our fingertips. We're going to want to use that. And I think that's going to make our projects and our process and our conversations with the ATC and Operations Committee really interesting to see where to put those dollars for the biggest benefit. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up.
Then related to that is in terms of a Finance Committee discussion, perhaps. So let's say we get through year 5 and we've spent $100 million addressing a lot of major needs. We have 5 more years, another $100 million. How does that, do we rethink certain things or invest in certain areas that were maybe underinvested in the initial 5 years? Do we rethink some of the things that are still consistent with the JPA agreement and what the voters voted on that give us the flexibility to address things more completely or things that may not have been addressed yet or whatever? Just want to think through that, because if it were a business, you might look at it that way, right? As an public agency, you're much more constrained. I understand that. But if you've achieved you know, 60% of your goals by year 5 or whatever, what do we do with the remaining $100 million? And how do we communicate to the public what that is and why, given the effectiveness of the programs to date? So I just wanted to put that out there as a thought.
And I'll address that very quickly. At the very beginning of the MWPA and coming in still now, new project funding, maintenance. We're starting to go like this, right? By year 5 and 7, I expect maintenance to be here, new projects here, and then using the data that we're collecting to find out what these new projects we should be funding. So yes, we're down that path. And I think year 5 to 7 is when we really tip the scale. Yeah.
Great. Bringing it back to any other board member comments or questions. Fred, go ahead.
I'll echo all the other comments. Great. I mean, it's great work. Fantastic. I like the process also. The question is, do you feel comfortable with the work plan? Because there's 123 proposals on here. I think there's 20 some odd new ones. So do you feel comfortable with the work plan and the ability to execute on it?
Well, yes, we're all working to staff up. Various member agencies are staffing up. We're hoping to staff up as well. This represents an incredible amount of work, not only to think through and plan for it, but also to implement. Yes, and I also am really excited that not only are we already creating really solid projects that I think will have a lot of benefit that carry on for many years, and we'll be thinking through how to not only come up with these great new ideas, but to commit to maintaining and supporting existing. So I feel a lot of confidence there. And then I'm really excited about the data that is coming online to help us really make priorities, data-driven, and then working to communicate that with the public through our website, through a dashboard, through our metrics. So stay tuned. You'll hear more about that coming up soon.
Thanks. Just want to make sure you guys don't get burned out. Thanks.
Thank you. Julie, go ahead.
All the projects that benefit the entire MP, Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. I'm wondering if perhaps you could, when this is put to bed, not right now, but if you could develop like a paragraph explaining each one and how they all work together, and maybe even some kind of a graphic that shows how they are all interrelated. And the ultimate goal is to make things more objective in terms of how we're addressing the wildfire mitigation needs.
Yeah, absolutely. We can think through some ideas for the executive summary as well.
Great. Mark?
Yeah, I agree, Julie, with everything you say. And, you know, the transparency is just so important for all of us. And, you know, I know that, you know, I go out walking on my neighborhood and I'm always explaining to people our shaded fuel break that we have in Stinson Beach. And most people don't know about it. And they say, oh, I wanted to go check it out, you know, so they do. And, you know, these are great things to tell people about, because then they're saying, oh, my tax money at work, it's great, you know, and I think that's something that helps our transparency and someplace we have to go.
Great. Great comments and suggestions. Yes,
Yeah.
Director Paulson, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, President. I think you sort of alluded to this already, but the whole topic of metrics. So I understand that we're getting metrics that are more like what Mark was talking about, risk versus hazard, you know, perhaps measurements. But even at the simple level, like sometimes you've reported out that, you know, this month we've, you know, cleared an additional 20 miles of evacuation route and so forth. The one thing I was hoping to see in the work plan was, you know, the money, like I read the Larkspur part pretty carefully. And so I understand there's vegetation management, home hardening, voluntary abatement, but I don't see any numbers like with the, you know, hundreds of thousands that we're putting into that. What's the expected number of homes that are reached? And I'm wondering if we could start, or maybe I'm missing it, you know, it's a 426-page report, but a rudimentary, projection of quantifying, you know, what the outcomes are for each of these work plan elements.
Yeah, we're working on the metrics actively, and it's a complicated story to tell. And I note that a little bit in my staff report slides that you'll see in a moment. But measuring how many acres or miles implemented also measures regulatory burden and barriers. It also measures, or it could be misleading because, Central Marin, for example, has 100 miles of evacuation routes covered under CEQA. However, there is no intention to actually implement 100 miles of that work every year. So what do we measure against? So those are all conversations that we're having now. And I expect actually a lot of progress has been made. Charlotte Jourdain has been really critical in that conversation, and some of the folks in this room have been helping out as well. So stay tuned for that as well, but that's in progress.
Gabe, any follow-up? Thank you.
No, that's it.
Director Finn.
There's one jurisdiction that opted out of joining the JP. Does that jurisdiction's projects or projects that it's not perhaps undertaking influence our decision-making when it comes to contiguous adjacent zones?
I would say that, Southern Marin Fire has been communicating with some of those jurisdictions to coordinate, because Southern Marin Fire has jurisdiction over some of those neighborhoods, Tiburon, et cetera. And so there's been coordination with Department of Public Works staff there to make sure that what we're doing is not only within the JPA. So you'll notice in one of the proposals, it references Tiburon, but that's because the work is within the JPA area, but coordinated with that entity. So yes, there's communication happening.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, the approval of the draft fiscal year 23-24 MWPA work plan, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. And sir, there are no hands for public comment, but it does look like Director Paulson's hand is still up. Director Paulson, did you have any follow-up or additional commentary on this agenda item? I think we're good to go, sir.
Okay, thank you. We'll bring it back to the board now for further discussion and or a motion to adopt the proposed resolution.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved by Burke, second by Kirsch. Roll call, please.
My apologies, sir. And starting with Bolinas, Director Molesworth.
Aye. Excuse me. Aye.
For Mill Valley, Director Burke.
Emphatically yes.
For the City of San Rafael, Director Kurtz.
Yes.
For the City of Larkspur, Director Paulson. It looks like Director Paulson might be having some technical difficulties. We'll come back to him. For Novato Fire District, Director Goings.
Yes.
For the Sleepy Hollow Fire District, Director Finn. For Southern Marin Fire District, Director Hilliard.
Yes.
For Stinson Beach Fire, Director White.
Yes.
For the Town of Corte Madera, Director Casisa.
Yes.
For the Town of Fairfax, Director Kohler.
Yes.
For the Town of Ross, Director McMillan.
Yes.
And for the County of Marin, President Rodoni.
Yes. Thank
And
you.
Director Paulson, were you able to join us? It looks like Director Paulson's having some technical difficulties, so that'll give us the unanimous vote of all in attendance.
Thank you. So we're still on item 8. We're going to B now, which is the fiscal year 23-24 MWPA annual budget. Mark, you want to kick it off?
Yes, and I'll do that with a screen share of the budget page. And I want to thank the Finance Committee for the in-depth work that they've done, the feedback they provided us. And one of the pieces of feedback they provided us is, hey, when you give us our proposed budget, please show last year's budget and also where we are year to date. That way it allows us to gauge if your proposed budget for next year is in sync with what's really going on. I promise I won't make you dizzy when I scroll back and forth in this spreadsheet, but I do want to start. I'll start at the top here. You see our proposed last year of $20,488,000. We're currently at 19,503 in revenue. We still have a 5% tax dump from the county coming up in June. And you see our interest is close to $30,000. Then next year we are predicting 21 million in revenue, just a hair over that. I will add that our last year's projection was 0.02% off. So that's pretty good. But the fact of the matter is, building space is building space. It doesn't grow, it doesn't shrink, and the only way it's going to shrink is if we're not doing our jobs properly. So that's why it's easy for us to predict the future year revenue. You see that we're only predicting $10,000 in interest. It's likely to be there, but we just want to be on the conservative side. For the next part, I'm going to now scroll to the bottom, and then I'm going to mostly work from the bottom up through the rest of the budget. It tends to make more sense that way. One of the things that gets asked about frequently is the $5 million surplus that we're looking at for this year. Two things. We had $4 million of rollover from last year that we're still expending through, and we have a couple of months left to close out our books. And some of our member agencies have been putting the lion's share of their money up front to get the work done, and then they turn around and invoice us. So we know that there are many invoices left to come back to us. So our pace and scale this year will exceed last year, and we're going to get really close to expending the entire 20 million that was coming into us. You see the grant expenditure or the grant costs that we received, 3.25 million from CAL FIRE, and that we've actually invoiced for 1.9 million of it. That's a positive. The granting agencies hate it when you get grant money and not spend it. And so if you show that you can be efficient with us expending those funds, it actually increases your chances for future grant opportunities. Now I'm going to just get to the administrative costs. We know that administrative costs or the budget is 10% of our core, so 10% of the 60%. So that gives us our 1.262 for our budget. You see an increase for financial and admin services from 107,000 to 159,000. That is our Southern Marin contract. And the pace and scale of our accounting has increased to the point that that is an appropriate increase in cost for us, in our opinion. Legal services, this 223 that you see here isn't actually the original starting point for us. It was about 184, but we had rollover that we pushed into that. We've expended 162 this year so far, and that included the brief for the UC Regents case. And so we feel the 192 for next year is appropriate. Personnel costs, primarily myself and Martina, and we feel that this is going to amply cover those costs. Services and supplies, we've again, it says 192 was the original, and it actually was 150. Again, rollover cost made it 192. We do think the 170 will be appropriate, and you'll see that we dropped the professional services from 150 to 40 or to 100 because we really just don't spend that part down. When we were first the MWPA, and a lot of our work was from professional services, that's why that number was high. Now that we're developing staff, that number can come down. What?
He's back.
Gabe is back.
Hi, Gabe.
So one of our easiest line items is the local wildfire mitigation budget item. It's the 20% in, 20% out when we received it. The next one is our D space. And again, it's almost as simple, but it does have a 2% holdback for abatement. There is discussions that the ops committee may recommend that we no longer fund the abatement. No one's using the abatement just because it is so time intensive for staff. Then we get into our 60% budget, and I'm going to try to get all of it into the screen. I did good. So actually I didn't, darn it, but we'll be close. All of this is really what Ann just walked you through. I might just highlight a couple little details, and it's, let's use line item. If you go down to core projects, line item 6160. You'll see that $771,000, 827 is budgeted. That's all the evacuation projects across the entire thing, bulked into one category. And then we have spreadsheets behind the scenes that track it project by project by project. So I do want to commend and Panorama and the work that you see that we started with a $750,000 environmental compliance budget last year. We're recommending $540,000, significant decrease, and that's because of the efficiencies that they have been creating. As Ann stated, you see zero funded for the EVAC study. That project is on time, on budget, and we've already budgeted for the entire project. So that's why we don't need any additional funding for this year. Evacuation management platform's easy. Rent, 3% increase, tenant improvements, so we can continue to build out this room to be an effective hybrid space. Got to keep the website up, communications, got to keep that going. One thing, Grizzly Corps, you see a significant drop, and that is the Grizzly Corps program has become so popular, especially in Marin. We were asked, can you guys drop from 2 Grizzly Corps fellows to 1? But we promise this, that one that you were dropping will stay in Marin, and that's what happened. So we felt it was better for us to agree to that, dropping down to 1, so that other agencies in Marin can benefit from the Grizzly Corps program. Training, you'll see that we originally budgeted $25,000. We dropped it down to $12,500 because we will appreciate the rollover. R&D, we still like to keep $25,000 in R&D just in case there's new and emerging technologies that we want to be able to jump on. But we haven't spent any of it this year, so we didn't budget any this year, and we'll just use last year's rollover into this next fiscal. Same with contingencies. We still will have a contingency budget. However, there's enough that'll roll over from 22-23 into 23-24. And then I really won't at all go into all of these. This is really where Ann has described what's going on. So, and that gets us back up to our $21 million for our final budget. And with that, I'll stop the screen share and take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from board members? I think this reflects the work plan and what we saw earlier. Mark, there was that one item on education that was more than Fire Safe Marin. So I just want to be reminded what that additional amount was.
That's for. The other agencies through their core projects have created education campaigns within their own zones.
Very good. Director Paulson, anything about the budget?
No, this is great. I just have a question.
We're not understanding you.
I'm wondering if there's.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I just I wanted to ask about, the reductions in costs, the efficiencies. Is that summarized? Because I think that's a great talking point, for in general, something I'd like to report out onto the council, and just to see how we're actually getting more bang for the buck on several line items.
Sure, absolutely. And I believe that's in regard to environmental compliance in that budget. Yes, so we have filed maybe 30 notices of exemption. And, as you know, we are overachievers in the exemption world, and we tend to create memorandums to accompany those documents that are very thorough. And we've got our system down, we've got our experts, we've got our processes and procedures. The first year we created an entire environmental compliance manual for member agencies and ourselves. Those costs are going down because we have our methodology. For example, our first CalVTP project specific analysis took maybe 8 or 9 months. The second, maybe 6. And the third will be somewhere around there, but we're just becoming more lean and mean as we go, and the cost reflects that.
Before we move to another question, I do want to give another shout out, and that is one of our member agencies had a project that was outside of MWPA work, but they needed environmental compliance. They were able to use cut and paste from our a project that was very similar to theirs, for that project that was outside of the MWPA space, but it's still the work that MWPA had done for them helped them with that project.
Really?
I just have a comment, really. Looking back where we were 3 years ago when we were deciding which environmental consultant to hire, and one of the line items in our budget could be for enormous litigation costs. And so I just want to commend you, Anne, and Panorama, because there's no litigation costs in this budget. And it is really remarkable that there's nothing. So it's a testament to the great work that you and Panorama are doing, and the synergies that you and the ESP have created, and the excellent communication. Because 3 years ago, I think we were all terrified that we were going to be spending a good portion of our budget defending our work in court. So it's really great that all of our money is going to actual work instead of to lawyers.
Thank you, Julie. Bruce, go ahead.
Just one quick question then. Mark, you characterize us going from original projects to maintenance. Can you refresh my memory on what the CEQA requirements are for reentry to maintain a shaded fuel break as opposed to the original environmental work that needs to be done to assess the resources there?
We really take it on a project by project basis, and it depends on the resources that are within that polygon, but it could include nesting bird surveys. It could include archaeological studies. It could also include botanical surveys. We are also adding geological surveys to that budget, because we're doing high level analysis of projects that include steep slopes, and then also some follow-up with the member agencies to think through how best to consider erosion and slope stability issues.
And if I can tag on to that, especially when it comes to the projects with a project specific analysis through the Cal VTP, that project technically will never be considered completed, and therefore the environmental documentation continues the whole way through.
Yeah, great. It's good to be clear that you still are required to do a project specific analysis, and there's 80 some resource attributes that you need to assess. If they're there, you need to assess them, you need to survey. But I would hope we would see some reduction. That they have the polygons, you have data already present. Hopefully there'll be some reduction in environmental compliance costs associated with maintenance.
And that was a topic of conversation also at the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force, was those ongoing costs associated with Cal VTP projects, because there are very stringent requirements for ongoing botanical surveys and other types of surveys that live forever with your project.
Great, Julie.
Sorry, just one more, Mark. Are we anticipating receiving any grant funding in the next fiscal year?
We've applied for a grant for the Greater Nevada Shaded Fuel Break. Early indications are positive.
Thank you.
Others, Stephen?
I believe you had $40,000 for communications and about 100 and something in contingency, just in case something goes sideways. I'd just like to encourage staff to think maybe later in the year, as things take shape. Communications isn't just buying an ad in the IJ or something like that, but what and how could we help as local representatives with, for example, educating our students to be scolds to their parents about why they haven't applied to the grant program, or whatever, thinking creatively about investing in communications to amplify the message around behavior and action for the taxpayers. I would just like to encourage some thought there. It doesn't mean you hire a PR agency or something like that, but there's ways we could work together to help you get the message out that would perhaps be money well spent in conjunction with all the other work that's going on.
You bet. And just a quick note for that Fire Safe Marin is really the people that are driving that. And they are working very hard to get into the classrooms. One of the struggles they have is the backlog of curriculum because of COVID. And so after they work through that backlog, we feel like we'll be able to get back into the schools. 5th grade age group is the target.
Great. We'll go to the public now. Martina, would you see if anyone in the public online wants to comment?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, the fiscal year 23-24 MWPA annual budget, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And so there are no comments currently.
Thank you. They're going to bring it back to the board for further discussion and or a motion, resolution approving the fiscal year 2023-24 MWPA annual budget. Thank you, Rachel.
And on the, as the chair of the finance committee, really appreciate all the work that went into building this budget and the participation of the finance committee members in reviewing it on line by line.
Thank you. And thank you for your work.
I'll second that motion.
Okay,
Great work.
motion by Kerf, second by Kohler. Roll call, please.
Certainly, starting with Bolinas, Director Molesworth.
Yes.
For Mill Valley, Director Burke.
Yes.
For the City of San Rafael, Director Kurtz.
Yes.
For the City of Larkspur, Director Paulson.
Yes.
For Novato Fire, Director Goings.
Yes.
For Sleepy Hollow Fire, Director Finn.
Yes.
And it looks like Director Hilliard she's no longer here with us. So for Stinson Beach Fire, Director White.
Yes.
For the Town of Corte Madera, Director Casisa.
Yes.
For the Town of Fairfax, Director Kohler.
Yes.
And for the Town of Ross, Director McMillan.
Yes.
And for the County of Marin, President Rodoni.
Yes. We're going to move to 8C, which is final action item. This is an item we've been talking about for a long time. The Vegetation Management Specialist, Mark.
Yes, and so the creation of vegetation management specialist positions were recommended by the Strategic Ad Hoc Subcommittee of the board to help increase the pace and scale. We've gotten our momentum going, and we feel that we need to increase our vegetation management specialist staff in order to keep that momentum. The ATC has vetted this, the Operations Committee has vetted this, and both recommended approval. It also increases our flexibility. The first VMS we hired was for chipper days. When Stephen Peters isn't working on chipper days, we're able to use him for other projects. And then when member agencies need support through the VMSs, we can provide it. And then for agencies, some of the member agencies are struggling with their own bandwidth as well. When they want to be able to implement their projects, they don't have the staff. So we want to be able to provide that as well. You guys, as the board, have already approved the position descriptions. You've already approved the salary survey, $79,000 a year with $31,000 in benefits, which is in line with our benefit to salary ratio. It's pretty low for public employment standards, 40%, where most agencies are at the 60% level for that ratio. And touched on that the vast majority of the payroll will come from projects themselves. We've established a project-based accounting payroll system. So when, let's say the VMS is working on the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, there's a project code in our payroll system. They enter that project code and it automatically puts the time towards that project and is pulled from that project funding. However, there are some projects that, or some work that they'll do that does not attach to a project. Mostly it's going to be building the next work plan. There's no project to attach to that. So that's why we've put $30,000 per employee in the operational cost to be able to keep that position going. So the total amount that you for this would be $222,000, 346, but it was built into the budget you just approved. So we are seeking the permission to create the FTEs and start the recruitment.
Thank you, Mark. Bringing it back to board for questions about this item. Go ahead.
Mark, who are these people reporting to? Thank you, Anne.
And so that leads to another question. And you know, do I think this is the end of the build out for staff? It's getting closer, but this is going to be able to allow us to evaluate where we are staffing wise. I potentially see the need for someone between Anne and the VMSs in a supervisorial role. It also creates a career ladder and advancement path for members of the MWPA. It creates succession planning for her. And it makes for a healthy organization. And then also a reminder that the way the MWPA language was written, that the member agencies could come to the MWPA and ask us to employ wildfire mitigation specialists for DSpace inspections. And so that is why when we asked you to approve the VMS position description, we also had you approve the wildfire mitigation specialist and a wildfire mitigation specialist lead position descriptions. We just didn't do the salary survey yet because we knew that we weren't going to be filling them. But we have them there so that if a member agency comes to us and says, we want you to start employing them for us, then we're ready to act.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Julie. Other questions? All right. Director Polson, anything on this item? Okay. So we'll go to the public now, please.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the position, personnel action, vegetation management specialist agenda item, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 to raise your hand if you are joining us by phone. And sir, there are no public comments.
Thank you. Bring it back to the board for further comment or a motion on this item.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Been moved by Going, second by Casissa. To approve this item, roll call, please.
Starting with Bolinas, Director Molesworth.
Yes.
For Mill Valley, Director Burke.
Yes.
For the City of Larkspur, Director Paulson.
Yes.
For Novato Fire District, Director Goings.
Yes.
For Sleepy Hollow Fire, Director Finn.
Yes.
For the Southern Marin Fire District, Director Hilliard. Not here any longer. For the Stinson Beach Fire District, Director White. For the Town of Corte Madera, Director Casissa.
Yes.
For the Town of Fairfax, Director Kohler.
Yes.
For the Town of Ross, Director McMillan.
Yes.
And for the County of Marin, Director Rodoni.
Yes, and that completes our action items. We're going to move back to staff reports, reminding everyone it's 4:32. They'll be brief, please. And the first one is 7A, report on Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority finance.
And our treasurer, Lisa Shipman, was not able to attend the meeting today. The vast majority of the data for this was actually in our last budget presentation of the year to date. We are, as of May 12th, we're 67% through expenditures. We're 86% through the fiscal year. Good balance for us compared to last year. And our administrative costs are at 71%, which is below the 71% projected, which is still behind the 86%. So we're keeping our administrative costs low in line with the language of the ordinance. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions on the treasurer's report, finance report? Anyone online, Martina? Yes, please. It's okay.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak regarding the current Treasury report for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority for the month of May, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining by phone. And sir, there are no hands.
Thank you. Bringing it back to the board for any further comments. No action is required. Seeing none, we'll move to B, which is the fiscal year 2022-23 work plan.
Wonderful. I have 102 slides starting now.
Could you cut a couple out?
I will keep this brief. I wanted to highlight a few things, including 2 recent field trips. We were hosted by Marin County Fire. We also worked with the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership and the Marin Housing Authority to host a field trip to the Marin City project. And this was a really great field trip. We had so many stops and starts trying to get this off the ground because of rain. So we were thrilled to get out there in the field and talk to folks. National Parks joined us as well, as you can see here. So this is a project to kind of encircle an affordable housing development near Sausalito and includes a lot of collaboration to make this happen. We had a really good turnout, maybe 45 folks or so, including some local electeds. We also hosted a field trip, as Mark mentioned, associated with the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force Central Coast meeting, and that took place just recently on the 12th. This was a great opportunity to highlight the work that we're doing on the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break and talk about the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority in general. It was really well received and included some really interesting folks from U.S. Fish and Wildlife and UC Ag and Natural Resources. 2 upcoming events that you should be aware of. We have a public workshop happening on May 26th at 6 p.m. to talk about the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break. We'll be sending out, or already have sent out, over 5,000 postcards to residents in the project area to make sure people know about this meeting and join us to hear about phase 1 of this project. It's a hybrid meeting. You can come in person to the community center here, or you can join by Zoom, and we have information on our webpage to register for that meeting. We're also working with Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership to host a webinar with Brandon Collins, who is a member of Scott Stevens' lab at UC Berkeley. He's an expert in forest and fire and land management. He's working in the Sierras and has a lot of information about how managed and unmanaged lands fared in the Dixie Fire and other fires. So a lot of lessons learned there, and we're asking him to focus on some California spotted owl issues and how that habitat fared in managed and unmanaged land. So I think it'll be a really interesting event. That's June 13th at 2 p.m. And then this last slide, this is a before and after photo from the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. And instead of including kind of statistics for acres treated this fiscal year, that is in the staff report, I wanted to include some of the complexities of how to measure progress. We have numbers on how many acres and miles are approved for treatment under CEQA, Coastal Act, et cetera. But it may be that not all of those acres need to be treated, or not all of those miles. So some of those project polygons and especially the evacuation route maps provide the flexibility to treat areas if needed. So for example, if a tree becomes hazardous in an area where a member agency wasn't planning on working, they can go out and do that work without additional CEQA because we have that covered. So even if San Rafael, for example, has 268 miles of evacuation routes that are covered under CEQA, they may only target 10 to 20 to 30 per year. So that adds to the complexity of how to measure how we're doing in a given year. So that's part of all the conversations about metrics that we're having to set us up for success, to really communicate what we're doing and how effective we are. And that's where I'll leave it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Questions of Anne? Yeah, Barbara?
Actually, not really a question, but a comment. I just want to thank Michael St. John and Brian Murphy, who met with me to go see some erosive slopes in the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break for potential broom work. And we did some site visits. We had some good discussions. There is some code issues with the town code. And anyway, I want to thank them. And I think we worked out a solution, and Brian has followed up with Mark. So thanks for all your work.
Great, Julie?
Just on the meeting on the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break, the slide said the 26th, but the staff report says the 24th of May. I think it's the 24th because the 26th is a Friday night. And I just wondered if you wanted board members there to help you or just be present.
Thank you for that. You're absolutely right. Is the 24th at 6 p.m. Alternatively, I bet I would probably say the 26th at 4 p.m. at some point, but just switching the 4 and the 6. Yes, board members would be more than welcome. We'd love to see you there. We're hoping for a good turnout. Novato residents have been really receptive and have been showing up and very interested in this project. As Mark mentioned, this project has been in the news quite a bit, and so I think it's gotten some attention. We're hoping for a really good turnout and a good conversation.
Great. Other questions, comments? So now we'll go to the public on this item, Martina.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current work plan implementation update, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. And sir, there are no hands.
Okay, bringing it back for further discussion. No action is necessary. Okay, thank you all. Committee reports, and I see Margaret's online for the Fire Safe Marin update.
Hi, thanks. Most of you know me by Meg McCabe, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I just came back from the Civic Center Fairgrounds, where we are in the midst of erecting a most amazing backdrop for for this weekend. We have a 16-foot scaffolding, which is hanging 3 full-size houses on it, which will have 3 20 by 30 plots of showing fire smart landscaping, complete with a full installation and furniture and plants and trees that people can go up and really experience. It's quite impressive. And we've got the new ideas stage, which many of you are going to be presenting on, to talk about new ideas in fire management. And we have just a full throttle support of all the community partners and memberships, and I think there are maybe 30 vendors or products and services that will be doing all sorts of demonstrations. And weather permitting, we're going to have our live burn demonstration that Todd and Steve Quarles are going to be leading. And the art exhibition I'm particularly excited about, because we had about 150 artists apply, and we have 50 selected works, which are absolutely beautiful, all exploring what it means to adapt to wildfire. And that really adds a very human element to all of the work and recommendations we give. So I'm just encouraging everyone here to come out, join us, bring your friends, bring your family, and it's going to be a fantastic day on Saturday. With that going on, we were able to, in April, we launched our 5th series of our Adapt to Wildfire campaign, and that brought the views of that outreach program to 10 million. And just as a reminder to everyone, the Adapt to Wildfire campaign is a very action-oriented outreach program. We focus each month on a specific task, a specific action that we want residents to take. In April, we focused on Zone 0, and we presented a very effective short demonstration of what it is if an embers shower lands in stone with nothing in Zone 0, it goes out. And that was a very succinct message that we've received a lot of good feedback on. The next messages that will be coming up are the MWPA is hard at work for you. And we're highlighting many of the accomplishments of the MWPA, and really trying to get people to see this as a true partnership, and that if everybody does their role and their part, that's how we're going to become a fire adapted community. Then along with the digital and social media, before I jump off of the digital, we saw a 40% increase in our visits to our website from last year, and a 30% from the month before. And what we're attributing this to is that people are they're engaging with our media presence, our social media, the the paid advertising we're doing, and they are clicking and visiting the site and doing follow-up research. So we're quite excited about that. The other, now that the weather has changed, we've had the opportunity to be out in the community and many live events, and we estimate that we've engaged with over 300 residents at events in Novato, Mill Valley, and San Rafael. We also did a training program with Vivalon to work with aging adults and making sure that they have an evacuation plan. And we even went back and had a second one when we asked them to go back, do their plan, and then come back, discuss it, and help us fill in when they had questions. So that seemed to be very effective, although it's a lot of time for the number of people we were reaching, but at the same time, it was also building up community awareness and good relations within the community. Rich went to Sacramento last month to the CAL FIRE Council's Coordinator Training and Legislative Program. And again, that's really important to building relationships and sharing information. And I think that's the highlights of what we're working on, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Meg. Any questions of Meg? Everyone's excited about Saturday, so thank you for updating us on the progress. Anyone online want to make comments on this item?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the Fire Safe Marin report, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. And sir, there are no hands for comment.
All right. Going to bring it back here and move to the next item, Advisory Technical Committee. Lynn, looks like
yes.
Report. Welcome.
Hello, all. Thank you, Chair and members of the board. Good to see you again. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lynn Osgood. I'm the Vice Chair of the ATC Committee. I think the staff today gave a pretty good breakdown of what we've been working on for the past 6 months, or what we have worked on in the past 6 months. We began working, back in December in 2022 and continued having monthly meetings through April, working on the process of the 23-24 work plan. In February, we were able to stand up an ad hoc committee that included representatives from each of the zones. And we began to meet regularly to actively dive into and basically dissect each of the proposals. I think really the ATC found our foundation and footing of what our role and responsibility is. And we really broke down and challenged the committee members to basically provide us with justification of what each proposal consisted of before we approved. And we had some difficult and uncomfortable conversations, which we had talked about earlier in the meeting about some of the proposals, but we are resilient and we managed to work through them. In the end, we were able to work through the process and collaborate respectively. And I think we came up with some really good comprehensive work plan for 23-24 year, including providing the needed priority funding for our West Marin zone. That was a real important one, so that they're able to continue to move forward with their projects and to cover the additional high costs of regulatory costs that they are accruing. And I really think that this has been within the spirit of how we were formed and how we help our partner zones serve their communities with the MWPA funds. So that was a real win-win for everybody. The ATC really appreciates all the support from the Operations Committee and from all the partners and stakeholders that have supported us, and for allowing us the extra time that we needed and the opportunity to put these plans together. And finally, the work couldn't have been done if it wasn't for all of the members of the ATC who, as we remember, also have other roles and responsibilities within our independent agencies. And so with that, this is the end of my report, and thank you. It's been a joy.
Thank you, Lynn. Questions of Lynn? Seeing none here, let's go online and see if there's any public comment about the ATC.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the Advisory Technical Committee's report, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. And sir, there are no comments.
Okay, thank you. And there's no action required on this. We'll move to item C, which is the Operations Committee.
Great. And the chair for the Operations Committee, neither the chair nor the vice chair for the Operations Committee were able to join us today, but I think you've heard plenty about what they've been up to, and they've been working very hard and in collaboration with the ATC and MWPA staff.
Okay. Any comments from board members? We'll just check the public for any comments on this item. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Make a comment about the Ops Committee. It's the 1-year birthday of Jesse Perry's baby. So I think that's why he's not here today.
Very good. Public comments, Martina?
If there are any members from the public wishing to speak on or comment regarding the Operations Committee, please raise your hand in the reactions or press *9 if you're joining us by phone. And so I see no comments.
All right, we'll bring it back to the board. Any final thoughts? No action is required. Item 10 is informational items. Just for you to all acknowledge, there's no action that's needed. Any comments on any of the A through F items?
If I could just add just a reminder that the first one, the board election process is part of the governance policy that we approved. May is when we started, where I asked board members to solicit or let us know if they're interested in becoming vice president or president. We do have the understood ascension from vice president to president, 1-year terms. So if you are interested, please send me a letter by June 1st. We'll post those letters for the June meeting. And that gives those directors an opportunity to state why they want to be in that role and what they hope to achieve. And then the first meeting after the fiscal year is when we vote.
Thank you. Any comments about that? All right, going to item 11, board member requests for future agenda items. Not seeing any. Thank you for going through. Oh, go ahead, Mark. Bruce.
If I may, Mark, and I'm repeating myself monthly, when the regional priority plan is ready for presentation to the board, I'd sure appreciate you bringing Danny Franker here to talk about that project and the relationship to MWPA's work.
You bet. And then if I can add, for June, what we're looking at is a presentation for the metrics for goals 1, 3, and 5. And we will have an interesting insurance discussion. And then even though the policy says we vote for the president, vice president in July, we're looking at canceling the July meeting, but the language allows us to vote at the first meeting after the fiscal year. So the vote for president and vice president likely will land in August.
Great. Thank you, Mark, for explaining that. Anything else that we missed today? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Congratulations.